Do all of you know the Young Turks?
An outlet like yourself that are willing to cover this story from the very beginning.
You have the Young Turks and a bunch of other progressive forces saying this is the time to fight for our values.
And I think right now there are a lot of progressive voters, many leftists who feel like they don't have a home.
And this is why what Cenk and the Young Turks are doing is so important.
What we've done is sustainable, slow, healthy growth. And I think that's the way news should be, where you don't rely on sensationalist stuff. You don't lean on whatever's trendy in the news at any given moment. You just go with the truth.
You gave me a platform.
You've uplifted so many other progressive voices through this network, and you're constantly looking for people that you can amplify through the work we do, through the infrastructure that you built at TYT.
It takes those early people who believe that can really be the seeds of this movement, and that has been the Young Turks.
We're super serious about the news. We also managed to do it in a way that is fun and lighthearted. We're not TYT, you're TYT.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Idarola. This is gonna be a big one.
Meanwhile, in the Arctic, you know where this is going. You watch the Damage Report, the Arctic's on fire. Obviously, why would we be talking about the Arctic except to tell you that it's melting once again? The Republicans aren't that interested in it. I wonder why. Lift out of poverty up to 3.7 million people, including an estimated 1.3 million children. Hashtag save the children? Not if it costs money. I mean, come on.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
There. You're watching The Young Turks. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian. It is a super Wednesday with both hours of the show just jam-packed with stories that I cannot wait to share with you guys. Later in the second hour, John Idarola will be joining me to talk about some of the updates in regard to the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. We'll also talk about how the right wing is essentially rebranding its manufactured culture war against Sesame Street and PBS. I've got my side pony because it's good to have that when you're talking about Republicans being nothing more than one-trick ponies. So it's gonna be a great show. In the bonus episode today, super producer Aishwarya one of the people who I would not be able to do this job without will be joining me for a discussion. I want you guys to get to know her. She's a really big part of the show, but a lot of the people who help to make this show happen are not in front of a camera. So you'll get to meet Aishwarya, you'll get to know a little bit of our process, and we'll get into some personal questions as well. So you can become a member by going to tyt.com/join, or if you're watching on YouTube, just click that join button and you'll be offered different memberships, and you can join at a price point that you're comfortable with. And as always, please like and share the stream, help to get the message out for TYT, because the more eyeballs we have on the show, that means the more people are hearing our message. Without further ado, why don't we get to our first story today? Because I want to continue discussing just how corporate media tends to frame things in a way that denies reality while simultaneously helping corporate interests, okay? Helping the very business interests that want to do away with any policy that would actually materially benefit your life. We need to know one thing, and it's an important thing to suss out. Is the corporate media incompetent, or are they just plain evil in the way that they frame any type of negotiation regarding social spending? Now, case in point, recently the New York Times had a fascinating lengthy piece on Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez titled, "Ocasio-Cortez isn't wavering, are New Yorkers on her side?" And the sub headline there is, by voting no on the infrastructure bill, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez set off a fierce debate, including among city residents eager to see the subways improved. Now, Representative Ocasio-Cortez was one of the progressive lawmakers who did the right thing in refusing to vote in favor of the corporate handout bill, also known as the bipartisan infrastructure bill. That was the bill that was promoted by the US Chamber of Commerce. That was the bill that received support among Republicans in both the Senate and the House, 19 in the Senate, 13 in the House. And it was great to see AOC stay true to what her promise was, along with other members of the squad, by the way, because the whole point was that progressives would vote in favor of the bipartisan infrastructure bill if and only if there was passage of Biden's Build Back Better agenda, which has all the social spending in it. All of the provisions that progressives, of course, prioritize, but more importantly, would benefit the lives of constituents that these lawmakers represent. Now, the context, of course, is important, but the New York Times didn't get into the context. They didn't get into the context regarding how corporate Democrats, certainly corporate Democrats like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema in the Senate, didn't hold up their side of the promise or their side of the deal. They were supposed to go along with the reconciliation bill as long as they got passage of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. They didn't hold true to their promises. But that context was missing in this piece. Instead, get a load of the framing that you'll come away with as you read this story. Now, they write this: yes, AOC is one of the progressives who voted against the infrastructure bill. Want to know why? Because corporate Democrats didn't fulfill their side of the deal getting the social spending bill passed. Like that is the point that they should mention. That was not in there. Here's what the lead was. This is the first paragraph in their story. As the number 6 subway train creaked toward an elevated Bronx station on Tuesday, one of Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's constituents stood across the street struggling to understand his congresswoman's opposition to the most sweeping public works legislation in generations. Then they move on and say the infrastructure bill, which passed the House last week, offers New York billions of dollars. And it was a top priority for President Biden, congressional Democrats, and even 13 Republicans, 4 of them from New York. This is the third paragraph. Yet Ocasio-Cortez and 5 fellow progressives voted against it. They argued that the bill was too modest and sought to use their votes to pressure wavering moderates to support a bigger climate and social safety net bill that is pending. No mention of corporate Democrats and how they failed to fulfill their side of the deal. No mention about any of the context that's relevant in informing AOC's decision to vote against that legislation. Now, again, those are the 3 paragraphs in the very beginning of the article. There's also no mention about how the bipartisan infrastructure bill includes provisions that would actually be incredibly unpopular with AOC's constituents. Provisions, for instance, that would allow for the privatization of public infrastructure, which means that corporations would be managing that infrastructure and, of course, would be implementing tolls and fees that Americans would have to pay as they're getting to and from work. No mention of that provision at all by the New York Times. They also didn't get into an analysis in regard to how exactly the bipartisan infrastructure bill would benefit AOC's constituents. They vaguely mentioned spending for public transportation. They vaguely mentioned a number, billions of dollars. Now remember, the bipartisan infrastructure bill only allocated about $550 billion in new spending. So what portion of that is going to help New Yorkers with their public transit system? Like, New York Times doesn't get into any of that, but they did just kind of vaguely talk about it or write about it as if it would overwhelmingly benefit the lives of New Yorkers. Okay, I mean, it's not true. There are certainly huge issues with the bill, but they didn't get into that. Now, they love to cite anecdotal evidence for how AOC's decision to vote against the bipartisan bill is incredibly unpopular in her district, so unpopular. Now, did they provide a representative poll to make that point? Because a representative poll of the constituents in that district would give you a better idea of whether or not her constituents disagree with her decision. They didn't do that. But they're like, oh, let's just find some people in New York in this district who didn't like her vote. And they gave the example of Emmett Allen, who says this: right mindset, speaking about AOC's decision, but wrong execution. There were other comments like that sprinkled throughout the article. But again, anecdotal evidence is not the same as maybe having a representative poll that shows how constituents in that district really feel. Nonetheless, the other paragraph that I wanted to draw attention to is where they write that even in her New York City district, perceived as one of the most liberal in the nation, there are sharp disagreements unfolding over how far left the party should go and how change is best achieved, according to interviews, get this, with more than a dozen constituents, elected officials and party leaders. Oh, fascinating. So what percentage of the dozen or 3 dozen people that you talk to represent her constituents? Because there's a lot of people mixed in that group of interviews. You've got some constituents, but then you have, elected officials and party leaders. I'm guessing elected officials and party leaders who have probably been pretty transparent about the fact that they can't stand the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. But we don't get any details about the specific individuals that they interviewed here. Let me give you more though. They blame her. They blame AOC for being divisive. They don't mention Joe Manchin. They don't mention Kyrsten Sinema. They don't mention the fact that Sinema would literally run away from her own constituents as they're trying to ask questions about legislation that she purported to support, and now all of a sudden has completely abandoned her base on. They didn't get into that. They didn't talk about how divisive that was, but they did talk about how divisive AOC is, allegedly. That she's divisive, she's the big baddie. She's the one who denied corporations, or tried to deny corporations, those sweet, sweet government contracts. How dare she? But let me give you more. They finally provide a positive comment about AOC in the 5th paragraph, no. The 10th paragraph, no. 15th paragraph, no. They waited until the 16th paragraph of the article to provide a positive comment on AOC. And it comes from an assemblyman, Zoran Kwame, who says this: all I've heard across the district has been support for the decision that she made. A lot of that is based on the fact that she was elected on the promise of fighting for more than the crumbs we've been told to accept. And he's absolutely right about that. And then my favorite part about this piece is how the New York Times decides to conflate AOC's constituents with the business community, going so far as to include the Chamber of Commerce in the same sentence as her constituents. Here it is. They write, some constituents, business leaders, and elected officials say that day to day she is not always accessible. Ideology sometimes has to go out the window when it comes to bringing home the bacon, says Thomas Gresh, the chief executive of the Queen's Chamber of Commerce, who said he has never been able to successfully schedule a meeting with the Congresswoman. By the way, that speaks very highly of AOC. Look, I will criticize AOC when I think she deserves the critique. Not taking up a meeting with the head or the VP of the Queen's Chamber of Commerce is something I can get behind. Go ahead and cry more, Gresh. But I'll give you more from this piece. Again, there's no mention of how Manchin and Sinema didn't uphold their part of the deal. All the blame was on AOC and how she's so bad, so naughty for not voting in favor of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. There was, again, no explanation or analysis of what's even in the bipartisan infrastructure deal and how it would be so great for its constituents, right? No mention of that. And so the real question here, and I wanna ask you guys, because this isn't the first time that we've talked about it this week. The media's framing on progressives versus the corporate wing of the Democratic Party. We've seen it happen time and time again. So the real question is, and we have a poll on this, tyt.com/polls, is the New York Times incompetent or evil in the way that they've been covering this story? And by the way, I wanna give you another example. This isn't necessarily about the New York Times specifically, but we have noticed something very specific in the way the cable news networks are reporting on the Build Back Better agenda, on inflation. Remember, we shared a story with you regarding former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, who I'm not a massive fan of, but he has been raising alarm over inflation in our economy. But the way that the media was reporting on it literally twisted his words, right? They put words in his mouth when, according to the op-ed he wrote this week in the Washington Post, this is what he thinks the solution needs to be in response to inflation. He writes, let's not compound errors that have already been made with far too much fiscal stimulus, he's talking about the Federal Reserve here, and overly easy monetary policy by rejecting Build Back Better. The legislation would spend less than 10 years than was spent on stimulus in 2021, because that spending is offset by revenue increases and because it includes measures such as childcare that will increase the economy's capacity. Build Back Better will have only a negligible impact on inflation. So Larry Summers is being very clear there. He's saying, look, I'm not saying that the solution or the response to inflation should be to kill the Build Back Better agenda. But if you watch cable news, they'll tell you a different story. They'll put words in Summers' mouth. Just watch.
Summers, he pointed this week to the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan that was passed earlier this year in March. He said that's a major reason behind the rising inflation, something he called at the time, quote, the least responsible macroeconomic policy we've had in the last 40 years. Is it possible that Americans are suffering now from high prices because the Biden administration overstimulated the economy with all of this money going into the economy?
The inflation thing is so real that everybody acknowledges it now.
And of course, it's not just Republicans. I mean, Larry Summers has worried about it openly, and Joe Manchin worries about it quite rightly. And the problem Joe Biden has is that it's going to affect the passage of Build Back Better.
They've already created a lot of harm this year with the previous $2 trillion package they passed earlier this year without a single Republican vote. It created raging inflation, which Larry Summers, the last honest Democrat in town, admitted was going to happen, predicted was going to happen. So the best way to sum up the impact of this package, if the Democrats pass it, and of course it'll be all by themselves, is they double down on all of the mistakes they've already made this year.
Yeah, well, I thought you put it well. I mean, and Larry Summers deserves a lot of credit.
Larry Summers deserves a lot of credit, unless you actually read his op-ed and noticed that he doesn't want to kill the social spending bill. that he's actually blaming inflation on the behavior that we're seeing from the Federal Reserve. You know, cheap money in the economy allows for private equity to borrow at near zero interest rates and invest that money in real estate, single family homes, which has inflated housing prices, and that's spilled over into the rental market as well. They didn't get into that because it seems like, I could be wrong, but it seems like the corporate media has an agenda here. For me, if I were to answer that poll, it seems like they're intentionally taking Larry Summers' words and twisting them in order to fit a pro-corporate, anti-social spending narrative. And in the case of the New York Times, to leave out so much critical context in their reporting on AOC's actions. I mean, it just shows you everything that they really stand for, who they really stand for, what they protect in this country. It isn't policy to benefit your lives. It isn't social spending to materially improve your lives. What they seem to want to protect is corporate interests and the US Chamber of Commerce. And if AOC and other progressives refuse to play ball in providing government contracts and handouts to corporations, because corporations love that kind of welfare, well, they're being baddies. They're being very naughty, according to the New York Times. Absolutely pathetic. Anyway, we gotta take a quick break. When we come back, we'll move on from New York Times and focus on how Politico loves to fillet people like Kyrsten Sinema. They did a long piece on her. We'll give you that story and more when we come back. What's up, everyone? Welcome to our social break. Jamba Gino writes in and says, much love to Anna and her production team. Absolutely would not be able to do this without my team. They're incredible and super hard workers. So I'm really glad that you guys are gonna get to meet Aishwarya today. I Am Sock says, mainstream media gets infinite negative cookies. Yes, we take all their cookies away, all right? Any cookies that they might have gotten in the past, I'm actually gonna take them back. Lend Me a Hammer for the Change Machine writes in and says, great breakdown of the AOC article, thank you. And Brett Ehrlich is the one who drew attention to that article, and I love the fact that he brought it to my attention. So I was happy to share it with you guys. I think it's important to read the news with a critical lens, right? To kind of question what the narratives are and challenge them when we can. Jojo H says, Anna, you and Cenk said the media was going to do this. This is why I only listen to TYT. Thank you so much. It's rare that we get credit like that. So whenever we do, I'm really appreciative of it. Franklin Sharpslicer writes in and says, I think this is another haiku or poem. As I, the poet dragon, did say, it's my 69th birthday. I'm not afraid to say to those who view, I enjoy spending my moments with you. Salt Dragon, Dragon Daddy, and Haas, that's Cenk. Oh, I like that. Happy birthday, Franklin Sharpslicer. We love your poems and thank you so much for writing in. Jonathan Ryder, thank you for your super chat. Very generous and I'm very grateful for that. Keep on keeping on is the comment. Sarah K writes in and says, I was just at the checkout counter at Trader Joe's and the man helping me with my groceries shouted, I love TYT, as I was watching TYT while paying. That's awesome. Oh, Trader Joe's. Listen, I go to Trader Joe's rarely because the parking lot situation is always a mess and it stresses me out. But whenever I do get there, I really stock up on snacks, like literally like 6 months worth of snacks. I love it there. Anyway, our Twitch community is going strong. Eldermine Pulse gifted 50 subs. Thank you so much. We also have Zolo Juro who gifted 5 subs. Drew in Georgia gifted 3 subs. Drink That OJ gifted a sub. L Parker gifted a sub. Queen Faye gifted a sub. Young Black Economist also wrote in 3 months Prime, by the way, with the comment, 3 months with Bezos bucks, but over 12 years as a TYT listener. The progressive base is loyal and strong, much to the chagrin of conservatives. Oh, I love it. Look, we gotta look out for each other as progressives, and I'm really happy that you drew attention to that. Bubba Christian is also a new subscriber with Prime. Thank you so much. Let's get back to the show. Welcome back, everyone. You're watching TYT, and I'm Anna Kasparian. Let's get to our next story. Politico, of all places. Politico has decided to publish a complete and utter fluff piece on behalf of Senator Kyrsten Sinema, someone who's done quite a bit of damage to herself in regard to the Democratic electorate or Democratic constituency in her own state of Arizona. In fact, if you poll Republican voters in the state of Arizona, only about 40% of them have a disapproval of her job performance. When you look at other Democrats in that state, the number jumps up to 75%. I give you that number because Kyrsten Sinema standing in the way of passing Joe Biden's social spending bill, which would provide paid family leave, which would call for lower drug prices, which would, do things that would really improve the lives of Arizona. She stood in the way of that. And now here comes Politico to essentially do positive PR for her and to completely ignore how her political corruption is what really motivated her behavior. So let's get to it. They write, Senator John Thune, the GOP whip, confirmed in an interview he's pressed Sinema to join his party multiple times. But Sinema's goal in an evenly split Senate isn't to toss away Democrats' majority. Despite enduring months of criticism from progressives on her policy positions, rock solid protection of the filibuster, and yes, even her fashion choices. So, she says, like, why would I want to join the Republican Party? No, my behavior has nothing to do with wanting to agree with Republicans, which might be true. Because really what's motivating her is corporate donors. We'll get to that in just a second, because I always love to come correct with the receipts and the evidence. But she's also trying to make it seem like she does all the negotiating on good faith. In fact, she says this, I've been concerned at the push that happens in both parties, this push to have no disagreements, to only have unity, or to only speak with one voice. And some will say, oh, that is our strength. Having some disagreement is normal, it is real, it is human, and it's an opportunity for us as mature beings to work through it. Yeah, but how about answering questions from your constituents in regard to abandoning them on key policy issues that you campaigned on? She claimed that she wanted to raise the federal minimum wage. She claimed to really care about responding to the climate crisis appropriately. I mean, that was actually one of the main things that she campaigned on. She also was a Ralph Nader supporting progressive at one point who claimed to be concerned about forever wars. She claimed that she wanted corporations to pay their fair share in taxes. Now all of a sudden she's changed her opinion on all of that. Did Politico ask her why? No. Did Politico challenge her narrative here where she's pretending to be negotiating on good faith? No, they didn't challenge it at all. it was just a giant fluff piece. I mean, the way that they decided to fillet her here is honestly incredibly shameful. And I wish I could ask these reporters, do you feel good about, like, how do you feel after you put out a piece like this? Do you recognize that you're not really doing journalism here, that you're providing a fluff piece and a positive PR article for Kyrsten Sinema? They probably told themselves all sorts of stories about how they're doing the right thing here. But they're giving their readers one side of a story coming from the very person who has a personal interest in rehabilitating her image. But let me give you more. She decided to criticize Democrats for having a bold vision for this country. In fact, she says that she will criticize her party for its complicity in setting unachievable, sky-high expectations, just like the Republicans who promised to repeal Obamacare under former President Donald Trump. You know, the difference is repealing Obamacare was unpopular, but the policy proposals coming from progressives and the Biden administration poll really, really well. There's a big difference there, but let me continue. A $3.5 trillion social spending bill, sweeping elections reform, a $15 an hour minimum wage, and changes to the filibuster rules were always a long shot, with Sinema and Manchin as the definitive Democratic votes in the Senate. Oh, was it always a long shot, Politico? Why? Why was it a long shot with Manchin and Sinema? Can you get into that? What are the motivating factors here? What is persuading them to vote against legislation, to vote against policy that their constituents overwhelmingly support? Can you get into that? Can you challenge her narrative here? No, they didn't do it at all, but let me continue. They then quote Sinema as saying this in regard to the Democratic Party. This is so rich. You're either honest or you're not honest. So just tell the truth and be honest and deliver that which you can deliver. Kyrsten Sinema, who is now on multiple videos running away from her own constituents because she doesn't want to answer questions about her corporate corruption, telling us about honesty, like, it's so rich to hear anything regarding honesty from her. But she's very bold, very brave. Let me give you more. The fact checks never happened in this piece. So you should read it for yourselves, don't take my word for it. They just allowed Sinema to say whatever she wanted to say, and they took it at face value. They provided no context, no fact checking. And I do want to maybe help the political reporters out a little bit, because look, I get it, this job is hard. Sometimes we get things wrong, sometimes we miss things. We were covering Sinema's corruption for months. In fact, why don't we go to this video of Sinema telling everyone about her corruption herself. This is while Sinema was speaking before the Chamber of Commerce, and she just loves being in tune with the business interests. Let's watch.
The way I make decisions on behalf of Arizona and for our constituents is by listening to the business leaders who will be impacted by these decisions. I can tell you that many Arizona businesses have already reached out to my office, and I know have discussed the concerns that they have with the PRO Act with some of the folks who are on our call today. We are watching carefully because some of the PRO Act provisions, especially in regards to the worker classification test for independent contractors, could become a part of other legislative ideas. So I would ask all the members who are joining us today to please stay involved with my office and help me by sharing information about how this would impact you and your company so that I can go back to Senate leadership and folks on both sides of the aisle to discuss the concerns that Arizona businesses have.
This is at the US Chamber of Commerce. These are business interests that do not want to pay more in taxes. And she's just brazenly saying, make sure you guys are hitting me up. Reach out to my office. We'll talk, because that's how I prioritize things. That's how I make decisions about legislation. And you know what talking really means. In fact, if you don't know what talking really means, Politico, let me help you out with that as well. Here's another video we did on Kyrsten Sinema and the pharmaceutical companies corrupting her. And remember, the Build Back Better agenda initially had a provision that would allow for Medicare to negotiate drug prices directly with pharmaceutical companies, allowing for lower drug prices, We pay 2 to 3 times more for pharmaceutical drugs in the United States compared to other developed countries, right? So doesn't it make sense to support a provision that would allow for Medicare to negotiate drug prices? No, Kyrsten Sinema was against that. Why was she against it? Well, she loves that sweet, sweet cash from pharmaceutical companies. Let's watch. Sinema formed a congressional caucus, by the way, to raise awareness of the benefits of personalized medicine in February. Then soon after that, employees of pharmaceutical companies donated $35,000 to her campaign committee. Now, it doesn't stop there. I want to give you specific examples. Amgen gave her $5,000. So did Genentech and Merck. Sanofi, these are all pharmaceutical companies. Pfizer and Eli Lilly all gave $2,500 each. Each of those companies has invested heavily in personalized medicine, which sounds great, right? Except it promises individually tailored drugs that can cost a patient hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Absurd.
And also, it's worth noting that for the 2019 to 2020 election cycle through March, this isn't even when she's running for re-election, political action committees run by employees of drug companies and their trade groups gave her $98,500 in campaign funds. I mean, I just think that kind of data, that kind of information is important. It's important to provide that context for your readers. No? Am I wrong? Because journalism is not supposed to be like glorified stenography. It's not supposed to be like, oh, here's a person in a position of power. You tell me what you want me to publish. That's literally what they did. Nothing more than a puff piece, just providing positive PR. This is journalism? What is this? I want to go to the last graphic here because she makes sure to double down on this notion that she negotiates on policies on good faith. She says, if you're in the middle of negotiating things that are delicate or difficult, doing it in good faith directly with each other is the best way to get to an outcome. I'm still in the process of negotiating the second provision of the president's agenda, and I don't negotiate in the press. It would be difficult to answer questions from real journalists. It would be difficult to talk to people who are actually informed about the motivating factors for someone like Kyrsten Sinema. She runs away from people like that. We have several videos showing you running away from people who have specific questions about her corporate greed, her close ties, her coziness to corporations. Just that Politico decides to omit all of that in their reporting and treat her as if she's a good faith actor who's just trying to do the right thing by her constituents. No, that's not what's motivating her. What Politico is doing here is PR. And if they want to do PR, go work for a PR firm, go be a publicist. But don't pass this garbage off as journalism. This is not journalism. It's not anything to be proud of. It's just shameful and honestly creates more distrust toward our institutions. When you hear people raging about the media, about the news industry and how they lie to people, this is the kind of stuff they're talking about. Stop running interference for corporate goons. If you're doing that, you're not a journalist, you're not a journalistic organization, you're a joke. All right, let's move on to our next story. Because I thought this was fascinating, all right? So we've got Ben Shapiro, he's on Rogan's podcast and all of that. I know he's made a bunch of appearances recently, but there's something else that caught my attention. Ben Shapiro argues that despite all of our societal issues, despite all of our societal ills, the one thing that will destroy America is wokeism. Let's watch.
So tonight, we're gonna talk about how wokeness is destroying America. And here's the thing. A lot of members of the left starting to realize that wokeness is destroying America. The problem with wokeness is that, bottom line, it promulgates lies. In particular, it promulgates 4 sets of lies. It promulgates lies about the nature of the United States. It promulgates lies about the nature of inequality. It promulgates lies about the nature of responsibility. And finally, it promulgates lies about the nature of truth itself.
Now, I debated Ben Shapiro before the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce, and we have some agreements in regard to so-called wokeism. We have some pretty significant disagreements as well. And I just wanted to respond to like the whole theme of his wokeism speech by saying, look, you could be annoyed with wokeism. You know, you could have your thoughts on that, and I've shared my thoughts on it. But to say that wokeism is what's destroying America is just a weird thing to say. Because there's a lot going on in this country right now. A lot that's causing pain and suffering among our fellow Americans that has nothing to do with the culture wars. In fact, a headline from today that was jarring and I wish got a lot more attention. 100,000 Americans died of drug overdoses in 12 months during the pandemic. That's a record. 100,000 Americans dead from drug overdoses. These are deaths of despair. These are people who are addicted to opioids, thanks to a lot of help from pharmaceutical companies pushing painkillers. I mean, that's a lot of people. You look at the body of this piece, New York Times reporting on it. The people who died, 275 every day, would fill the stadium where the University of Alabama plays football. Together, they equal the population of Roanoke, Virginia. But here's what's also jarring. The new figures, which are provisional but rarely change much in final tallies, represents a 28.5% increase from the same period a year earlier. Here's the relevant part. The financial, mental health, housing, and other difficulties of the COVID-19 pandemic are widely blamed for much of the increase. So on one hand, we've got wokeism, which can be annoying, can have some unintended consequences by people who I think have good intentions. I think want equality of opportunities, you know. But to say that that is the one thing that's destroying America, I just, like, hyperbole doesn't even cover how ridiculous that statement is. Okay, you have people literally sleeping and dying on the streets, 60,000 of whom are living and dying on the streets of Los Angeles County alone. Okay, so there are real economic issues, and I just want to get to a point in this country where we focus on that. But it's really hard to do it when all you've got on the right is nonstop fear-mongering about culture war issues. By the way, women haven't been able to get back to the workforce. Even when they want to go back to work, they can't do it. They don't have childcare. Some schools are still closed. They can't afford childcare because they've been paid insanely low wages their entire working lives. Maybe talk about those issues, but no, it's wokeism. The real problem in this country is teaching about racism in our public schools. That's what's destroying America. Anyway, let's get to the second video because he does give specific examples of what he means, and I respect that. I tend to disagree with his diagnosis here, right? Because there was one moment where he finally got into economic issues, which I love, awesome. And get a load of his perspective on meritocracy. You know, I think there's this myth of meritocracy in this country, but he's pushing it along with this notion of personal responsibility. So let's take a look at that.
Any system that rewards skills has excellent externalities for third parties. In any society, some people are going to be rewarded and some people are not going to be rewarded as much. The question is, what metric do you use in order to delegate who is rewarded and who is not? Presumably, as a society, we would like to reward people such that the externalities of their activities make our lives better. That's why we reward Bill Gates for creating Windows. That's why we reward Elon Musk for making Tesla. Right? The system rewards that labor specifically because it makes a lot of people, it makes their lives better and it makes their lives easier.
So, you know, he gives this example of people who have been incredibly successful in this capitalist economy. Elon Musk was one of them. But to leave out how much government aid people like Elon Musk have taken advantage of, I think is unfair and wrong. So for instance, here's just one headline. This is coming from TechCrunch on June 23rd of 2009. The government comes through for Tesla with a $465 million loan for its electric sedan. But by the way, that's just one example of the government coming to the aid of Elon Musk. I'm curious to see how Elon Musk would perform without all the help he got from the federal government to launch his business and to sustain his business. Let me give you more. This is from the New Republic. A 2015 Los Angeles Times investigation estimated that Tesla, Solar City, and SpaceX had together benefited from $4.9 billion in government support. That included, for example, a $465 million low-interest loan from the Department of Energy in 2010 that helped Tesla ride out the effects of the Great Recession. Since then, Texas's Travis County has offered a $14.7 million at minimum tax break for the building of a Tesla factory. A Nevada factory was built on the promise of up to $1.3 billion in tax benefits over 2 decades. So listen, if you want to commend someone like Elon Musk for being a visionary, for having ideas that were revolutionary, you want to make that point, that's fine. I certainly have my disagreements with Elon Musk, but I'm not gonna minimize what he has thought about doing and what he has accomplished, but you also have to acknowledge how much help he's gotten from the federal government. Because let me tell you something, ordinary Americans, they're looking to start a business. It's a lot harder to get capital like that from the federal government. And it's incredibly hard to get approved for a business loan. So, it's that saying, like people who think they're, people who are like born on third or second base and they thought they hit a double. I mean, it's just another example of that. Just be honest about how the government plays a role in not only subsidizing these private companies, but more importantly, in providing the seed money when they try to get these ventures started. And that's certainly what happened with Tesla. Moving on. I also want to talk about the myth of meritocracy in this country. Now, I'll give you a specific example to reinforce the point I'm trying to make here. I believe Ben Shapiro went to Harvard, okay? Smart guy, went to an Ivy League school. But I think that there's a misconception about how people who get accepted into these institutions are the brightest, the smartest, the best of the best. I don't know if that's the case with Ben Shapiro. I'm not gonna get into his personal merit, but I am gonna get into a study that was done by the National Bureau of Economic Research, and they looked at the admissions over at Harvard specifically. Here's what they found. Among white people who have been admitted to the university, over 45% are ALDC. Okay, you might be wondering, what is ALDC? Well, that includes people who have been accepted for things like legacy admissions, people who got a scholarship because of a sport that they engage in, also people who have gotten admitted because someone in their family has made a massive donation. So that's what they're referring to when they mention ALDC people who have been admitted to Harvard, okay? Among admits who are African American, Asian American, and Hispanic, the share is less than 16% each. Our model of admission shows that roughly 3/4 of white ALDC admits would have been rejected if they had been treated as white non-ALDCs. So look, there's the racial component to it, right? But I like that they did this control where they take out the legacy stuff, where they take out the sports, and where they take out donations to the university. Because all of a sudden you see the likelihood of these people getting admitted to the university drop significantly. Let me give you more. In addition to this, admissions preferences for ALDC applicants are substantial. We find that a white non-ALDC applicant with a 10% chance of admission would see a 5-fold increase in admissions likelihood if they were a legacy, more than a 7-fold increase if they were on the dean's interest list, and that they would be admitted with near certainty if they were a recruited athlete. So again, I really want to emphasize the point that meritocracy in this country is a myth. And I agree with Ben Shapiro, actually. There was a part in his speech where he talked about some schools doing away with the grading system because students are struggling. I don't agree with that. I don't think they should do that. I read a Los Angeles Times article about how teachers are like struggling right now because due to virtual learning, a lot of students are failing their classes. They don't know what to do. So they're going from a grade-based system to a pass or no pass. I disagree with that, sorry. So I actually happen to agree with Ben Shapiro on it. However, to then turn around and say, oh my God, wokeism is destroying our system of meritocracy is just a lie because that system does not exist. There is a system in place that overwhelmingly benefits the privileged. And when I say privileged, I'm talking about people who come from money. People whose mama and papa can donate, some money to the university. That plays a role in whether or not this Ivy League accepts you. End of story, right? And by the way, I do want to also mention that there's a specific reason why people like Ben Shapiro kind of shy away from economic issues and they really hone in on the culture war. Number one, everyone hates the culture war. Everyone does have an issue with, the scolding that takes place. Like, let's keep it real, all right? So the left has kind of become the scolders. The right loves it because that's all they want to talk about. And then in the meantime, the left is missing out on an opportunity to relentlessly attack the right on what they are the least popular on, and that's economic issues. The John Deere workers who are on strike, 40% of them identify as conservatives. And I just want to remind you all of why they're striking in the first place.
They wanted us to agree to do away with pensions for any new hires that came after us.
I'm not willing to sell out my future brothers and sisters that might be coming in here. Could be your kid, it could be the kid down the street. We're not interested in having our retirement plans in a Wall Street speculation portfolio. We want something guaranteed.
Corporations don't want to pay their employees a fair living wage with a fair cost of living increase. Instead, they want to shift that over to stockholders and the president, CEOs, and vice presidents.
Over the last year, our CEO's pay has gone up 160%.
They're projected to make between $5.7 and $5.9 billion in profits this year.
Whether you're a Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, leftist, doesn't matter. If you're a worker in this country, you're experiencing the same thing. And the policies that the right, I don't know what policies the right wing wants. The only thing they've been calling for is protecting corporate interests and cutting taxes. They love it. That's all they advocate for. If we could focus on hitting them where it hurts and also mock them for only relying on a culture war for their messaging and campaigning, I think that we might have a path to victory. But instead, we keep giving them content again and again, giving them stuff to, do these speeches on. I'm sure they get paid handsomely for these speeches. Focus on what they lose on. They lose people once they talk about their vision for the economy. They lose when they pretend that we live in a meritocracy. They lose when they point to American workers and say that if they're struggling and can't feed their families, it's their fault. They're not taking personal responsibility. He knows how capitalism works. I know he knows how capitalism works because I told him during my debate with him before the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce. Let's watch. As an employer, right, it's not that you have to be awful to your employees, but you have a fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders to return, to provide a return on their investment. That's literally like it's baked into the system.
That's true.
And so as a result, what's the most expensive cost within a business?
It's always labor.
It's always labor.
We're also
so
in
when we
competition
talk
with other
about
people who pay.
exploitation, right? Exploitation always makes it seem like you're actively brutal and awful to your employees, which in some cases that does happen, but it doesn't even have to get that far. The whole point is to extract as much labor for the lowest possible price.
That can only happen in a
order to
monopolistic situation.
increase profits and provide a return of investment to your shareholders. That's just the way the system works.
That's right.
That is just the way the system works. And he knows it. And he'll say, no, the system works fine because, companies need to compete for labor. And when they compete for labor, that's when they increase wages. But pay close attention to how they're talking about the labor shortage right now. But more importantly, pay close attention to how they're talking about inflation right now. Oh, these higher wages, it's translating to inflation, these higher wages, because they don't want you to get paid higher wages. Hit them where it hurts, guys. It's easy. We just need to stay focused. All right, we gotta take a break. We'll be right back. What's up, everyone? Our programming today is some of my favorite because after the bonus episode, you guys can check out Happy Half Hour hosted by Brett Ehrlich. Good news and good booze, of course. Twitch.tv/TYT is where you can watch. And he has probably one of my favorite brackets of all time. The bracket is on what is the best item sold by an ice cream truck? I think it's the Choco Taco. I don't even think it's a competition, but you guys might disagree with me, who knows? You can take part in this by watching and taking and participating in the bracket, TYT.com, Twitch.tv/TYT, and definitely check it out. I love Happy Half Hour immediately after a bonus episode. All right, let's go to our super chats. We have Lee Middleton who writes in and says, we need Justice Democrats to start a movement, vote D or vote Democrat until you get a good Democrat, get rid of all incumbents. So Lee, certainly over the last few months, my views on electoral politics have not been good. And I'm not minimizing electoral politics. I think people should vote strategically, and I'm not minimizing what you're suggesting here. I think that that's a good strategy if you're just focused on electoral stuff. But no, look, politicians aren't really accountable to people at this point, right? Because people have no power because they're not organized. Organize your workplace. We need to find a strategy to provide any support we can to people who are employed by these massive corporations, the Walmarts, the Amazons, right? Like if we could get workers organized and if we can actually coordinate with one another to do, let's say, general strikes that have a plan in place. Like doing a general strike with no protection is not smart. Right? You want to have a strike fund. You want to have something set up to make workers whole as you do these strikes. But it's really the only way. Like they're not gonna listen to us. They're gonna be sucked into that machine unless we make them listen to us. So how do you build power? That's what the real question is, right? Peter Grudge says, I know I don't say this often enough myself, but I've been following TYT for years. You guys really do an awesome job and I always have your back. Peter, thank you so much. And I love your last name. I feel like I can be called Anna Grudge here and there for sure. Michael writes in and says, Sinema is like a minivan I saw once that switched on its left turn signal lane, then turned right. Yeah, you know what? That happens a lot actually on the road and I don't like it. I don't like it when you want to make a left turn and then someone coming from the opposite direction is about to make a right turn, but they don't signal that they're gonna make a right turn. That makes me very mad. Jessica writes in and says, this morning I saw Politico's article on Sinema and thanks to TYT, I saw right through it just by reading the headline. Thank you, TYT. I believe we can be the change for a better future. I agree. Bad Catholic writes in and says, Bad Catholic Hall Pass Dragon says, wokeism is destroying America. People are picking their heads up out of the minds and waking up to the fact that they are busting their asses only to accrue more debt and go broke, then get called lazy. Exactly. well, let's get to our next story before we get to our second hour, which of course will be joined by John Iadarola. I want to talk a little more about what's happening with gas prices. So, Joe Biden, of course, has been getting a ton of pressure in regard to what Americans are feeling and experiencing at the gas pump. Gas prices are high, and people want Biden to do something about it, even though his ability to do something about it is pretty limited. So Biden is now asking the head of the Federal Trade Commission to do an investigation on whether oil companies are illegally increasing the prices of gas, right, at the pump. And so that's an interesting tactic, right? An investigation into oil companies. I mean, I'm always down for an investigation into oil companies. However, it misses the main point, which is there is throttled oil production right now, specifically to spike prices at the pump. That's what oil producing countries are doing on purpose. So let's just be honest about that. I don't know why he's not speaking out about it, but that's what's actually happening. Now, he says this, he wrote a letter to Lina Khan. She is the chairwoman of the FTC. Prices at the pump have continued to rise, even as refined fuel costs go down and industry profits go up. In the last month, the price of unfinished gasoline is down more than 5%, while gas prices at the pump are up 3% in that same period. This unexplained large gap between the price of unfinished gasoline and the average price at the pump is well above the pre-pandemic average. And he also notes that 2 of the largest oil and gas companies in the United States are on track to nearly double their net income from 2019. So they're doing pretty well. But part of the reason why they're doing so well is they can limit the production of what we need, right? Of petroleum. Limit it, and if you limit it and you have higher supply, well, then you'll get an increase in prices. Essentially, they're manipulating the market. Now, let's talk about OPEC. I've talked about OPEC with you guys before, but here's what's happening. And I commend The Hill for including this context because many media outlets have just completely ignored this. Here's what's really going on. Many of the factors impacting gasoline prices, such as global oil production, are out of the president's control. Currently, a group of oil-producing countries and their allies, known as OPEC Plus, are steadily increasing their oil production, though the United States has urged them to do so more rapidly. Now, Saudi Arabia is being particularly difficult in responding to Biden's request to produce more oil. I would venture to say, this is just speculation, that Mohammed bin Salman probably is not too friendly toward Biden these days. Biden did conduct an investigation into the slaughter of Jamal Khashoggi, who was, of course, murdered because Mohammed bin Salman ordered it. Now, Biden didn't do anything after he conducted that investigation and had the findings. He just decided to let it go. But I'm guessing the investigation itself and the findings of that investigation didn't make Mohammed bin Salman so happy. But look, putting that aside, even if it's not a retaliatory thing being conducted by Saudi Arabia, oil-producing countries want to make money. They want to make money that they missed out on in the beginning of the pandemic. So of course they're gonna manipulate the market by holding back production. But this wouldn't even be an issue if we weren't dependent on fossil fuels, right? If Democrats like Joe Biden, for instance, focused on pivoting toward renewable energy decades ago, instead of sucking up to corporate interests, instead of providing oil companies more government subsidies, maybe they should have focused on developing renewable energy in this country and getting us off of oil dependence. That would have been pretty nice. Then we wouldn't be struggling with persuading other oil producing countries to help us out. Also, maybe some of the oil that we produce in this country shouldn't be exported to other countries if we want to lower, gas prices in our borders. I don't know, just a thought. We also have oil reserves that we could tap into. But again, these are short-term solutions. The long-term solution should be renewable energy. moving toward electric vehicles. Now, there's been some movement on that by the Democratic Party, but obviously they didn't move quickly enough. All of that stuff should have been fought for aggressively, and it should have been accomplished so we wouldn't find ourselves in the situation we're in today. But it is also important to know how this system works and why we're seeing higher gas prices at the pump. It's not because we have more social spending in the country. It's not because there's increased demand, but production has been the same. No, there might be a little more increased demand. People are traveling more, certainly. But there's manipulation also happening because of the OPEC plus cartel holding back production. That's what's really going on. All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, John Iadarola will be joining me to give you some updates on the Kyle Rittenhouse trial and more. Don't miss it, we'll be right back.
I'm old enough that I remember when Captain Crunch put the berries in it.
Yay, crunch berries!
And I was like, ooh, the fake berries.
Remember?
We're gonna try that.
We did a story back in the day about how a woman sued, I don't know, General Mills.
She'd been eating it for 4 years, believing that it was actual berries. Yeah, she's like, these aren't real berries at all. Yeah. I'm like, I got news for you, Captain Crunch isn't really a captain or a person. Joining me now, legendary whistleblower and American hero, Edward Snowden. First question is, hey, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Moscow.
All of a sudden, in the studio, Jim Gaffigan, everybody.
Mental illness is, completely undiagnosed in our society.
It's not about a particular administration. It's about a broken system of power, and through that, really, the instrumentalization of a system of not justice, but injustice.
People understand whether they claim to deny climate change or not. Our collective house is in crisis. We're also dealing with the legacy of 40 years of economic policies that have made people's lives more precarious.
Sometimes you got to force people into their humanity. Sometimes you have to shake people into empathy.
Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us in the studio.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights.
In order to actually achieve that vision of everyone having access to the same resources and getting to determine the outcome of their life, we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to start right now.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Iadarola. This is gonna be a big one.
What Donald Trump has done as president has cut taxes for the wealthy and made life better for rich people. But he's made life worse for poor people.
We're making America great again by throwing more money at the military to destroy other countries, because that makes us great instead of investing it in ourselves.
That it's Donald Trump and it's Stephen Miller. The choosing is based on wanting to create cruel and inhumane conditions to scare other people away from ever coming to the United States.
The opportunity to make money off of tragedy is the American way.
There's only one place to put garbage people: in the trash.
We've never had so much access to so much information with so little idea of what the hell is going on.
What does enforcing our borders have to do with traumatizing children? Absolutely nothing.
I think a sane person could say the current situation we have right now is radical. But what we're doing is literally making the world more like hell. That's a warning sign.
ShopTYT.com now has books. One of them is Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People. That's a saying that AOC said, they've got money, we've got people. It's the best tracing of the AOC victory I have seen anywhere. It's the most accurate, and it's got great details. The book actually goes all the way back to Jesse Jackson and how he was the original Bernie Sanders. If you want to know how we're going to win going forward, those lessons are super important, and they're in Ryan's book. So check it out right now at ShopTYT.com. We found the perfect person to lead the army.
Allison Parks.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
There's a human in there. A human.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back. Anna Kasparian and John Idarola with you, wearing that bomber jacket.
Yes, it's cold in here.
Yeah. You know, that hunter green color is really in.
Is it?
Yeah.
Am I trendy?
No, definitely not. But
Am I
do like
setting
that
the trend?
Maybe. Although I went to the Lakers versus Heat game.
That's also trendy.
That is trendy. Last Wednesday, and I had the time of my life. Oh my God, I'm forgetting the name of the player. No, I love Westbrook, but no, that's not what I'm talking about. The one who's injured right now.
Oh, why don't you look to me to supply the name of this athlete?
You know why? LeBron. LeBron was there, of course,
well,
but he wasn't playing because he had an abdominal injury or something. But
yeah.
He was wearing a hunter green, outfit.
Sometimes when we hang out, we coordinate.
Yeah, exactly. But they're besties, of course. Duh.
We play a lot of board games together.
He was looking like Fidel Castro with that outfit, though. Just keeping it real. Just keeping it real. But it was a great game. You guys should check it out. Anyway, probably you already have. It was last week.
It was before, actually. That's how sports works.
All right. Let's move on.
We don't watch the reruns that often.
Some people do. My dad likes
Sometimes
to watch.
I'll binge a season.
Will you?
I'll binge a season.
Binge a season of basketball. All right. Let's get to the Rittenhouse trial. My favorite topic, of course, because stuff happened today. People are losing their minds about it, and I wanted to share my thoughts. So, Kyle Rittenhouse played a direct role in choosing, although randomly choosing, the final 12 jurors in the case against him, okay? So let me give you some context, but then we'll go to some video. So 18 prospective jurors sat through 2 weeks of testimony and arguments before Rittenhouse was told to pick 6 numbers out of a tumbler. Now, the 6 numbers corresponded to jurors who were then stricken from the panel, resulting in the 12 who were sent into deliberations. Now, the video of this exploded on the internet. People lost their minds about it. I'm gonna give you context that matters, but before I do, here's the video in question.
Numbers out of the tumbler yesterday. I'm now reading about how bizarre and unusual it was to have the defendant pick the numbers out of the tumbler yesterday. I do it because of an incident that I had in a case I tried in Racine, and there was a black defendant, and there were 13 jurors, one of whom was black. And when the clerk, the government official, drew the name out of the tumbler, it was a black, the only black. There was nothing wrong with it. It was all okay. But what do they talk about? Optics nowadays? Is that the word for things? That was a bad optic, I thought. I think people feel better when they have control. Ever since that case, I've had an almost universal policy of having the defendant do the picks. It had nothing to do with anybody's race or anything like that.
Okay, so a lot to unpack there. Now, before we get into his statement on, as he said it, a black, we'll get to that in a second. I want to address this, right? So it is actually pretty unusual for the judge to do that. But the judge is telling the truth in mentioning that that's what he does with almost all other cases. So we looked into that, and that is the case. The person, the defendant, does end up picking, at random from the Tumblr who the eventual jurors will be. The people who will deliberate and decide the case. So I just want to mention that because I do think that's relevant. There have been moments in this case where it appears as though he's a little in favor of Rittenhouse. But in this particular case, regardless of what the optics look like, and I agree that the optics aren't great, the judge is being consistent with what he's done in previous trials. He's just getting attention for it for the first time now because the Rittenhouse trial is such a big deal.
It's televised,
Yeah,
and look, I think that if you are facing, as he pointed out, an issue with the optics of the selection, what better way to distract us from it than to say the things that he said, which is its own optics issue, but we'll get to that, I know.
Right, no, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so okay, we were sort of talking about this a little bit earlier. So the thing that we do here is that we bring our life experience and our values and we advocate for and against things. That's what we do. We try to ground it in the facts. We try to make sure that you understand what's going on, but we advocate for things. What we do not simply do is say, oh, that's the law? Well, then I guess it's right. That's the regulation? I guess that's right. They've done that before? Well, then it must be right. So he seemed like aghast at somebody has a problem with this policy of like powerballing this thing and then having the defendant do it. We've done that before. I don't care about that at all.
Right.
You could put each of the jurors on like a spot of a dartboard and then huck a dart at it. That would be a way to do it. Maybe you could do it for a few years. Then it would be the way it's done. It's still wrong. This is not a game. Okay, you're not supposed to be doing bingo with the jury. Honestly, him selecting it is weird, especially considering, as you very lightly put, the ridiculous bias that the judge clearly has for Kyle Rittenhouse. But just the entire process itself is comical, and nothing about this process should be comical. We're talking about the fate of a person who killed people.
Yeah.
It should not be drawn like a little ball or something. We're not playing Powerball. We're choosing a jury. Honestly, have a computer do it. Something with a bit of dignity.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem with a computer doing it, obviously. I don't really think it matters, right? Like this particular thing, I think you're right that like the optics are absolutely bad, right? But at the end of the day, is it really gonna have a bearing on the outcome of the trial? I don't think it will.
No, I get it.
And so, yeah.
I just don't like it.
I totally understand that.
It's the 29th stupidest thing about this entire process, but it's on the list.
But do you guys get what I'm saying when I comment on the judge, right? Like the judge should shut up. Just stop talking.
I never want to hear him again.
And look, member of our audience was very upset that I, had the audacity to talk about the judge's conduct during this giant controversial case. I'm gonna keep talking about the judge's conduct because the judge's conduct in the multiple examples that we've given you guys is unacceptable. Like, and he doesn't want people to lose faith in the system. Right? But like, it's insane. It's insane because every single time he's tried to explain his decisions, he's made himself look more biased. Like
biased and kind of incompetent.
And incompetent.
At least technically,
are we really
if not
deny
legally.
That, guys? Like, let's be honest. I've been honest after seeing the evidence that's been presented during this trial. The evidence, in my opinion, supports the claim that Rittenhouse had a reasonable fear of an imminent threat, and that's why he fired his weapon. That's what the laws are, right? The burden of proof to find him guilty is incredibly high, and based on the video evidence, the photos that have been shown, the screenshots, all of that stuff, he could reasonably feel that his life was in danger.
Yeah, and so could the people he shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can point that out. That's our job. And then we can also point out that it seems convenient that conservatives have started to do the thing where they take a lethal weapon, they put it near a person, then they say that they're scared and they start shooting.
Well, they're losing their minds right now over anti-Rittenhouse protesters showing up in front of the courthouse, not inside, in front of the courthouse, carrying weapons. I mean, I agree, I don't like that, but I also don't like members of the right-wing militia groups showing up with weapons on a night when Black Lives Matter protesters are out there protesting a police shooting, right? But you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have a double standard. If left-wingers or people who disagree with what Rittenhouse does show up with weapons, you can't then turn around and say that's unacceptable.
Maybe they're just medics.
Maybe they're just there to
that's
clean
why they showed
graffiti off the streets. Maybe that's what they were there for.
How about nobody bring a gun around?
Exactly.
Stop being weirdos. How about that?
Yeah, that's my
point. If you wouldn't bring a bow and an arrow somewhere, don't bring a gun. Now you're hiding behind, well, it's cooler and it's like it's a part of America or whatever. If you wouldn't carry a sword, don't carry a gun. If you wouldn't carry a battle axe, don't carry a gun. You're a bunch of weirdos. You live in a modern country. You don't need a gun. There's no bear coming at you. You're not in a war zone. This isn't cosplay. This is the real world. Stop carrying guns everywhere you go. I had an ad before a YouTube video of some sort of tactical belt that was supposed to be better for holstering guns at all different angles. Why are you living in a fantasy world? We live in a real world. Just like do your job, go talk to your family, get a hobby, seriously. Stop with the guns everywhere.
Yeah.
If Kyle Rittenhouse hadn't brought the gun, nobody would have died. And that's the same exact situation in so many of these situations. They just result in more people dying.
I just can't get over the fact that his mother thought it was a good idea to go to Kenosha, Wisconsin. Like she went with him. Like I don't know, like if I had a 17-year-old and I was genuinely concerned about a protest devolving into violence, just wouldn't show up with my 17-year-old. I don't know. Anyway, moving on, other things that happened. I think it's a good sign that the jury is still deliberating and they've asked specifically for evidence to help make their decision. Drone footage of the shooting. They're asking for apparently some sort of image that the prosecutors and defense had access to, but the jurors didn't have access to, so they're asking specifically for that. Look, the jurors, they're taking their time, they're deliberating. I think the system is working the way that it's supposed to, right? But I do want to mention one other thing that I thought was funny. So at one point during the trial, everyone's like looking at some evidence. And there's this image of Kyle Rittenhouse like standing beside Judge Schroeder as they're reviewing the evidence. So there it is. I just love the internet sometimes because they photoshopped it. So I want to go to the photoshops immediately.
As long as it doesn't involve AOC, I'm fine with whatever Photoshop.
So they photoshopped it to make it look like they're playing video games.
Wait, but that implies that they're buddy-buddy.
The courtroom during daily lunch breaks, nothing to see here. So good. Let's go to another one. Fake. And then Brett Ehrlich writes, "Wait, why did you Photoshop the controllers out? What are you hiding?"
Wait, was that a reply to the Photoshop?
That was a reply to, yeah,
I think
exactly.
that person replied to the Photoshop.
Yes.
Because that person felt like they were doing fact checking by pointing out that the judge in a murder trial wasn't actually playing Call of Duty with the defendant. Well, thank you, I'm glad. We need good fact checkers here in America.
That, by the way, that Call of Duty Photoshop is really good.
It was pretty good.
Yeah, because I mean, I imagine that's exactly what Schroeder would look like while playing video games. Just confused, befuddled.
Very confused.
Yeah.
How do I throw a grenade?
So look, we just gotta wait and see what the verdict is. I don't think that the Rittenhouse picking who the jurors are randomly from Tumblr is gonna make a difference in this case. But nonetheless, I can understand why people are not appreciative of the optics that come along with it. Mm-hmm. Also, man, Judge Schroeder just needs to stop talking.
Yeah.
Just stop talking.
Maybe retire.
That'd be great.
Consider it.
I'd enjoy that, yeah. And apologies to anyone who's offended by that comment. Anyway, with that said, why don't we take a break, and when we come back, Sesame Street. The right wing is at war with Sesame Street because that's the issue that matters. We've got those details and more when we come back. What's up, everyone? Welcome to our social break. We've got so many comments. I gotta show some love to our members, starting with Meg, who says, "Oh boy, Politico coming back with their bullcrap." It's in regard to a first hour story I did. Absolutely, but Politico's got a lot of bull crap. Like they've been pretty consistent in the bull crap department.
That's true. Well, they saw Axios licking her boots, like
Totally.
her Uggs, I should say, this entire time, and they're like, "Hey, we can do that better."
Yeah, we could do better, totally. Occam's razor, my bad, says, "Come to my office so I can be somewhere else when you stop by." That's in regard to Kyrsten Sinema. Unless, by the way, she's talking to the business community, then she'll be at her office. Believe me.
She'll be at their office.
Starshine, yeah, it's a good point. She'll even freaking go to Europe to meet with them, as she did.
Yeah, don't know which
recently.
country, because I'm only an American citizen. Why would I know that?
Starshine Song Dragon says, my husband is post-stroke. He would benefit from a drug that costs $900 a month, not covered by his insurance, and we can't afford it.
Terrible system.
We have to win. And the left needs to be united in the economic message, and we can't get baited into the garbage coming from these culture war manufacturers, okay? Like, anyway, that's the reason why I cover the Sesame Street stories. It's not to like debunk what they're saying about Sesame Street. It's to mock them and just really make it clear to everyone. And please spread this message that they're intentionally distracting you from stuff that matters.
Agreed.
Exactly. Colorado Blue Blazer Regular says Biden is so concerned about gas prices, he immediately turned his back on COP26 and put another huge swath of our coastal waters up for bid to drill. You're absolutely right about that. That was something I wanted to talk about earlier in the week, but we didn't have time.
It was only 80 million acres.
How, like
only.
we're such a joke on
like
the
a
international stage. How embarrassing are we?
I don't know. Most
Where you
countries
have,
are doing
like,
it too, though.
Biden's
We're all
like, oh, Trump is gone. And now we're super serious about climate change, and you guys need to do this, and you guys need to do that. And then he turns around and he's like, let's do more drilling. Like, what are you doing?
He's playing the long game. You can't keep burning fossil fuels if you've burned all of the fossil fuels. So as soon as we can get to that, then we're done. We're cut off for the rest of the time.
Post-traumatic South disorder says, damn, this judge can weave a tale. Every story he tells, it's like I'm there. Such a good comment, totally. He's like, I'm not gonna lie. I would enjoy an opportunity to have a few drinks with that guy because I feel like he's a riot, right?
The judge?
Yeah, he's crazy. I think it'd be hilarious.
I agree, he's crazy.
Like, it's not that I'd like him. I just think I'd enjoy the wacky conversations.
I would have a drink a couple tables away and watch you guys. That's every interaction I want to have at a bar. Just away, watching.
Yeah.
He likes to watch.
Thank you to our new YouTube members. We have Melody McCluskey and MTL Artist. Thank you so much for being YouTube members.
I drink straight away.
Back to the show. Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasperi, John Idarola with you. Check them out on The Damage Report, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. It is a fantastic show.
We try.
You've got Nina Turner on there.
Sometimes
You've got Francesca Fiorentini on there.
A lot, yeah.
Franny Fio.
Big News Wednesdays with J.R. Jackson.
J.R. Jackson
We've got
holding
Mulaney
it
Stamp
down.
tomorrow. We throw away garbage people on Fridays with Brett Ehrlich.
I like to throw away garbage people.
It's pretty fun.
So
you should come on
check it
Friday
out.
sometime.
I know. Except I got a lot going on.
I
And
know.
we film weekends on Fridays.
I know, it's a bad day for you. Okay, we'll throw away some Thursday garbage sometime.
But I love John's show and I wish I had more time to do a lot more stuff. Anyway, with that said, why don't we move on to the latest in the rebranded PBS culture war that right-wingers are engaging in. So, Conservatives, once again, are trying to distract Americans with nonsense that has absolutely no impact on their lives, but does deflect from the fact that right-wingers have no solutions in materially benefiting the lives of people who end up voting for them. With that said, let's go to Sesame Street, because Sesame Street is at the heart of all of your material problems, of course. Apparently, Sesame Street has come out with a new Muppet, a new character, and the right wing they don't like that, okay? So Sesame Street is welcoming its first Asian American Muppet to the neighborhood. Ji Young, a Korean American 7-year-old who loves playing her electric guitar and skateboarding, will make her debut next week. Now, this character won't just be sharing her love for rock music and Korean rice cakes, which I also happen to enjoy. She will also play a role in countering anti-Asian bias and harassment at a time of heightened awareness around the issue. Now, as soon as this came out, I'm like, oh, the right wing is gonna be like, yes, yes. The next manufactured culture war. We don't have to talk about how we're massive failures who do nothing but provide tax cuts for corporations. So here you have Matt Schlapp, who put this out. What race is Ernie and Bert? I'm sorry, what race is Ernie?
Is Bert.
Is Bert. I think, yeah,
Words
probably a
tough.
typo there. Especially for people like Matt
letters
Schlapp.
too, and then you have to put multiple letters together to make a word. It's a whole big thing.
Yeah, but this is my favorite part. You are insane, PBS, and we should stop funding you. And I want to make a point here. This is the most important point. The right wing has always been the same, certainly in terms of their messaging, because they have repackaged this Sesame Street PBS culture war for like decades. I'm not even kidding, 4 decades. Let me give you a little taste, okay? Going all the way back to the Nixon administration.
Oh my God.
Efforts by the Nixon administration to control public broadcasting, purge it of commentators considered hostile to the president, and reorganize it so it might serve the administration's aims, are detailed in newly disclosed documents from files of the White House Office of Telecommunications Policy for 1969 to 1974. The impetus was coming from the political side, which wanted to zero out the funding for public broadcasting because President Nixon disliked it. The reason was simple: it never did anything for him. Right.
That could be about Trump.
That could be about any Republican. Let's just keep it real.
Yeah.
Okay. So you got Nixon engaging in this war against PBS, but it didn't stop there. Why don't we jump ahead to 2011 when Ben Shapiro weighed in on PBS. In fact, he said that he had this fantasy of killing Sesame Street characters. Let's watch.
Every kid in America is going to hate you. You take it on Elmo and Sesame Street and Big Bird in your book.
Yeah, I kind of want to take him out back and cap him, but no, that's not what the book's about.
Ouch! Ouch!
No, not at all.
The hell was that?
Clearly an older clip. I mean, there's no word on whether he has changed his opinion on murdering Sesame Street characters, but yeah.
It's just such weird.
Yeah, put a cap in him.
The whole thing is so weird. And I'm sure at that point, Sean Hannity's like, I have to do a show with this kid. I know that we're supposed to pluck out these supposedly independent Republicans and raise them up so that they can be the next generation, but this guy's terrible.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure Sean Hannity loves it because what else are they gonna talk about?
That's true.
What else is Sean Hannity or anyone at Fox, are they gonna talk about the minimum wage? Are they gonna talk about how they're against labor unions? 40% of the striking John Deere workers identify as conservative.
Screw them. Yeah, well, I have a feeling that probably quite a few of the coal workers are conservatives. Screw them. They're on the wrong issue.
They're unpopular on economic issues, which is why they manufacture culture wars and they just repackage, rebrand the same culture war decade after decade after decade. Let me give you more examples. Here's Mitt Romney, Republican Senator Mitt Romney, during the 2012 presidential election, where he was, of course, the Republican candidate.
I'm sorry, Jim, I'm gonna stop the subsidy to PBS. I'm gonna stop other things. I like PBS, I love Big Bird, I actually like you too. But I'm not gonna keep on spending money on things to borrow money from China to pay for.
We're not borrowing money from China to pay for PBS. By the way, PBS is also funded by private donors. So about a significant portion of their money comes from private donors. But yeah, they're also partly funded by the government because it's important. By the way, I learned English through Sesame Street. English is not my first language, Armenian is. I went into kindergarten, honestly, not speaking a single word of English. And when I had that assessment test, it was super embarrassing for me. I felt like a failure, I felt awful. And so I forced myself at a super young age to wake up super early and watch Sesame Street so I could catch up. I'm so grateful for Sesame Street. It does incredible things for people, for kids. And of course they want to attack it. And I don't even think they want to attack it because they genuinely have an issue with Sesame Street. It's just the only thing they can talk about because what else would they talk about?
They need something.
They need something.
No, the second that the new Muppet was announced, I tweeted, this is the Daily Caller and the Daily Wire. They just got a week of stuff out of this.
They love it.
Because again, what else are they gonna talk about? And none of this is about either playing to already established core values of conservatives or laying out some actual standard that I feel ridiculous to have that next to me. Don't you want to cap him?
I love him.
But no, none of this is anything real. Like when it was about a couple of Dr. Seuss books that the Seuss publisher didn't want to publish anymore because nobody had ever heard of them and nobody bought them. Conservatives lost their mind. Trying to cancel those books is the biggest threat to America ever. When was the last time that you heard a conservative talk about those books or Dr. Seuss generally? Do you see a lot of conservatives sitting on the bus reading obscure Dr. Seuss books? They don't care about any of this. It's empty calories, that's all it is. They have to have news shows, sort of, whether they're Sean Hannity or the Ben Shapiro. There's supposed to be something that will delude conservatives into thinking they're consuming the news, that they're following what's going on. So you have to fill the time with something, and it's all nonsense. It's misinterpretations of pop songs, it's obsessions over what Muppets are doing. And you can do a little bit of that, that's fun. I don't think all news has to be super serious, but there is supposed to be something of substance, and there never is.
There never is.
If you watch Hannity, if you watch Ben Shapiro, if that's where you get your news, you literally have no idea what's going on in this country, and that is not mere speculation. Studies have been going back literally years showing that they're the most misinformed people around, more so than people who don't actively follow the news.
And that's on purpose.
It is actively producing ignorance.
Yeah, no, but exactly. Because think about what awareness would mean if people were actually aware of how our system works, how the system incentivizes exploiting labor, right? But more importantly, how the very people they trust for news are intentionally distracting their attention away from the bread and butter issues, which by the way, they take a role in creating and making very difficult for ordinary American workers. They want to distract away from that. It's all a method, it's the same. Look, they're one-trick ponies. The right wing, one-trick ponies. That's it, that's all they've got. So call them out on it, mock them on it, and force them to talk about their economic policies because they're unpopular. Let me give you one more point. I think there's one person, one right winger who is genuine in his disdain for PBS and specifically Sesame Street. And that person is Donald Trump, someone who does not have a lot of humor, doesn't have a sense of humor, and certainly takes things very personally and likes to hold a grudge. With that said, here's the reason Donald Trump probably legitimately hates PBS and Sesame Street.
I'm Donald Trump, and I have more trash than all of you, so yeah.
It may be the end of the road for Sesame Street. Real estate tycoon Ronald Grump has announced plans to demolish Sesame Street and create a lavish new Grump Tower.
Hey, look, I love you people. You deserve some of the finer things, trust me. You won't miss all this.
But Mr. Grump, this street is our home.
Yeah, we like it the way it is.
You'll have. Okay, that's it. I tried to be nice to you people, but you don't want to listen? That's it, you got 2 weeks, pack up and get out.
Whose name equals trash to you? trashiest. I'm the grouchiest.
So good.
Yeah.
So good.
That was pretty good. If I could add only one, and not to take away from that, the only other point I would add is I think it is obviously worth us continuing to push back against this, and between any individual story, making sure that people understand that this is a continuing conscious strategy to bamboozle people and to get them to support politicians that have no interest in ever acknowledging the actual problems that their constituents face. The right wing does it in the most aggressive, xenophobic, racist, misogynistic way.
Yep.
That's what they do. Whether it's him talking about capping a Muppet or Steven Crowder mocking an Asian woman's face, that's what they do. They look for hatred, fear, suspicion, and jealousy, and then they weaponize it every day under the guise of news. CNN and MSNBC are largely the same. They don't use the same tools, but it is still designed to fill the space that news would fit in.
Yes.
You will occasionally get a little bit of news, and I'm not saying that everyone's exactly the same. Chris Hayes might do a segment on Yemen or something like that. And I think that their fill-in is closer to the news. It feels more newsy. But again, it's not actually looking out every day at what's really going on and trying to figure out what the problems are and how they could potentially be solved.
Absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, they're owned by the same people. Whether it's Fox, CNN, MSNBC, the Daily Caller, the Daily Wire, the same billionaires own all of these things. And if it's not the same individual, they all hang out at the same parties.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that. And I like that you it really is something you see on both sides. And I think that it's important to differentiate on the left, the independent news organizations like us who actually want to talk about the bread and butter issues, and those who pretend to be either fair and balanced or on the left, but just weigh in on nothing more. Like they legitimize the culture wars, right? Because they don't want to talk about how this country is basically run by corporations.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got to take a break. When we come back, honestly, one of the most disgusting Tucker videos I've seen in a long time. And that's saying something because he churns them out every day. But this is one of the worst. We've got that story and more when we come back. Colorado Blue Blazer regular in our member section says something that reinforces what John mentioned. Dems love the culture wars too because it obfuscates their own abject failures at everything. You're right. I mean, we saw that with Terry McAuliffe in Virginia, right?
And also, we can also have nuance. We can differentiate. There are culture war topics that really affect people and are real. Look, this is that Muppet thing is about
perfect example.
Exactly.
That is, yes. I
or
agree.
even like that Muppet thing is about race. Issues having to do with race matter. Their attacks against the Muppet don't. They take things that are real and then they strip it of all of its significance and make it about these negative emotions.
Absolutely. Moondragon says, 1 year ago today, I started watching TYT. Scared of Cenk at first, but I've come to love his outrage.
Same.
But here's my favorite part. And your earnestness is always awesome. Thank you, because I don't think that earnestness is popular these days, to be honest. I think people get clowned on for being too earnest. But sure. I am an earnest person. Yeah. Ernest
does the news. Yeah. That's the movie I'd watch.
It's so funny. Andy M says, doing a great job, Anna. Keep it up. Thank you so much. November 1775 Jim says, watching this judge on a bench is a bad optic. Pepperoni Dragon says, hi. Nice.
Hi.
Elaine Kelly says, Pennsylvania is already trying to put tolls. Of course they are. Putting tolls on bridges to use the infrastructure money for other projects. You guys called that one. Man, that infuriates me.
Tolls?
Umberto writes in and says, Anna can be a tad harsh, but she's always real. Thank you for that comment. And yeah, I could be harsh. I just want you guys to understand, like doing this every day, it's soul crushing. And I'm salty for a reason, right? So call me harsh if you want, but it's who I am. I actually care about this stuff. Trista says, Anna's self-defense is an affirmative defense. The burden of proof shifts to defendant. Kyle has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt each and every element of the defense self-defense statute. If the jury doesn't believe beyond a reasonable doubt, it's homicide. So yes, I hear what you're saying. If I were on the jury based on the evidence that was presented, I think that he meets that burden of proof. But I could be wrong. I mean, I don't know. I'm not deliberating with the jury, but that's where I stand on the issue. But that doesn't mean that I'm supportive of Kyle Rittenhouse. I just think, if we want the law to be applied evenly, then we got to be honest about the evidence that's supporting his argument here or supporting the defense. All right, and then moving on.
And then perhaps long term, modify the laws to take into account the context of what the person did, how they got into the situation where they desperately needed to do a last minute defense of themselves.
Yeah. And Jeff Waldorf, thank you for the 200 bits and the comment. Hey, New York Times manufacturing consent again. We got to get back to the show. See you guys there. Welcome back to TYT, Anna and John with you. Let's get to, honestly, one of the worst Tucker segments I've seen. Tucker Carlson, in one of his recent shows, called for gunning down protesting members of Black Lives Matter. Now, before we get to that portion of his commentary, I think it's worth noting that he mocks the idea that black people are more likely to be shot and killed by police in America because there's an abundance of data proving him wrong. But nonetheless, here's his argument.
So they told us that a cop shot Jacob Blake in the back for no apparent reason. And by the way, Jacob Blake was unarmed. He was helpless. They just pulled him out of a lineup and shot him because that's what America's like. Kamala Harris then jumped in and said she was, quote, proud of Jacob Blake, like he was a civil rights hero, like he was shot for being the wrong color, as so often happens in the systemically racist country.
So he was being sarcastic, but it certainly does happen in this systemically racist policing system. In fact, why don't we actually look at the data? It's readily available. Tucker Carlson works at Fox News. They have way more resources than we have. Maybe put a producer on that, right? If you actually genuinely care about getting facts to people, but of course he doesn't. So look at this graph. This graph specifically looks at the rate of police shootings in the United States between 2015 to October of 2021, and it's per capita based on per million of the population. The first bar in the graph represents black people getting shot and killed by cops, and it's 37 out of 1 million black people. Then you go to the second highest bar, and it's Hispanic. What a shocker, 28 out of 1 million. White is only 15. Now, I wanna get to a point where we minimize police shootings across the board, regardless of race, right? We want justice for all. We want people to have their day in court, even if they're suspected of a crime. But clearly, the numbers per capita prove that African Americans, black people, are disproportionately shot and killed by cops in America. So I just wanted to provide that context since Tucker Carlson couldn't be bothered to look for that and provide that in his analysis. Now, with that said, let's go to his disgusting comment regarding what should be done with protesters.
So this is what Kenosha looked like the night that Kyle Rittenhouse arrived to help defend local businesses. Well, that's not a civil rights protest. That's not people fighting back against oppression, systemic racism. That's just people destroying things they didn't build. That's people wrecking our civilization. In no normal country would that be allowed. It would be put down immediately with force. That's why we have police. You can't allow that, because if you do allow that, people get killed, as they did.
They should be put down immediately by force. Let's remember that quote. I want to come back to it, but first, John.
Yeah, I don't know where you start. Every second of that is an issue. It's all the dog whistles of they're destroying things they didn't build. They're doing it to our civilization, people like Tucker and his audience. Look, his entire shtick, and he is exactly. I know he's supposed to be some sort of independent thinker. He's a different sort of conservative. That could have just been an O'Reilly sketch from like 10 years ago. It's exactly the same thing. Is denying the truth of a thing that they know to be true and like being true. That's what they do. They pretend, oh, it's a systemic racism. Like they know that the system has been set up to benefit certain types of people and go after others. They know that, they like that, they want that. They spend all of their time trying to get people to be supportive of that by terrifying them. Tucker Carlson himself has spent a year and a half doing that, continually talking about how mobs are gonna come for you. This week, talking about how mobs are gonna come for you and there's nothing you're gonna be able to do when the mob comes to your door. They're trying to instill and strengthen race-based fears and hatreds. That's what they do, and then pretend that it even exists.
Now, listen, I'm empathetic to anyone who sees video like that and thinks, hey, what those people are doing in the video, that's wrong, right? I disagree with it. They shouldn't be starting fires, they shouldn't be breaking into businesses. But I also think that it's important to be consistent. And that we don't see that consistency with people like Tucker Carlson. So just imagine, imagine for a second, and I'm gonna help you imagine, I'm gonna help you visualize what a fair Tucker Carlson would be like. A Tucker Carlson who on one hand condemns violence if it's carried out by the left wing, but also does the same if the violence is carried out by the right wing. Because we know that violence certainly is carried out by the right wing in this country. So let's reimagine a Tucker Carlson segment where he's actually fair. Let's watch.
So this is what Kenosha looked like the night that Kyle Rittenhouse arrived to help defend local businesses.
They broke through the police line and people are going in. The doors are open.
Well, that's not a civil rights protest. That's not people fighting back against oppression. That's just people destroying things they didn't build. That's people wrecking our civilization. In no normal country would that be allowed. It would be put down immediately with force. You can't allow that, because if you do allow that, people get killed, as they did.
Now, of course,
I mean, that's just too good.
Tucker Carlson would never be consistent.
No.
Tucker Carlson has gone out of his way to blame the Capitol riots on Antifa. Then he turned around and said, no, it was meant to set up the right wing. I mean, like he's changed his narrative.
It's all a plant.
Yeah, it's all a plant.
They're political prisoners.
Yeah, the Capitol riots happened.
Yeah.
And these are Trump supporters who are incited by the right wing to try to overturn the results of our democratic process because they didn't like the results. These are people who are chanting, hang Mike Pence. I mean, so.
Why weren't they shot? Why weren't they gunned down?
And let me be clear, I don't think that those people should have been put down immediately. I believe in justice. They should have their day in court, and many of them have had their day in court.
Yeah.
But for Tucker Carlson, hey, if you're protesting police violence and some people take advantage of that situation to riot, everyone should be put down, unacceptable. But if there are riots in the nation's capital, that's totally fine as long as I agree with them. That's what Tucker Carlson's saying. He's not consistent at all.
Yeah, and in fact, he will spend the entire year since January 6th defending them. putting together whole InfoWars-style documentaries about how great these people are and how they've been set up and it's not fair. To add to the list of the dog whistles, by the way, you put down animals if that wasn't clear enough. So weird, total slip of the tongue that he said that even though it was scripted, it was put in a teleprompter, and he very specifically chose those words. No, we know what he's there for. We know what, like, it's become, I guess, a bit blasé now to just point out that he is a fascist. That's what it is. There are hierarchies in society that he supports. Age hierarchies, political hierarchies, religious hierarchies, gender and racial and religious hierarchies that should be enforced by the state. That's it. It doesn't mean that they genuinely love soldiers or love cops. They'll beat a cop to death if they stand against conservatives. But they're there to protect conservatives. That's what they're there for. And so no, there's no consistency. He will flip-flop anyway as long as it results in people like him maintaining power. That's what he's there for. That's why he has an audience.
Exactly right. All right, well, let's move on to Gosar, because that's been in the news today for good reason. So, right-wing reject, Representative Paul Gosar, someone who's been rejected by several members of his own family, has faced censure today. The House has voted to censure him over his posting of an anime video that was edited to make it appear as though he was harming members of Congress, specifically lawmakers like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now, before we get to details about that, I think that AOC's speech on the House floor about this issue was powerful, was important. So we're gonna share a portion of it with you. Let's take a quick look at that.
Not just the Republican leader, but I have seen other members of this party advance the argument, including Representative Gosar himself, the illusion that this was just a joke. That what we say and what we do does not matter so long as we claim a lack of meaning. Now, this nihilism runs deep, and it conveys and betrays a certain contempt for the meaning and importance of our work here. That what we do, so long as we claim that it is a joke, doesn't matter. And I am here to rise to say that it does. And as leaders in this country, when we incite violence with depictions against our colleagues, that trickles down into violence in this country.
I mean, she's right about that. And we've seen how that has played out, right? I mean, we've seen how the rhetoric coming from the right wing has emboldened the worst elements of this country to take to the streets, to run counter protesters over in Charlottesville, Virginia, to chant things like the Jews will not replace us. I mean, I know that this country has grappled with racism and xenophobia and all of that for a long time, but it was largely in the shadows for a while. And then Trump comes in and just openly supports hatred, openly through his rhetoric, divides the country further and gives people emboldens people, enables them to just come out into the open and say things that they've been thinking for a long time. You have members of Congress emboldened by this. Think about any other work environment. Think about any other work environment. If you put out a video like that in regard to one of your colleagues or coworkers, would that be acceptable? There'd be disciplinary action immediately. So I think that in this case, it's the right thing to censure. I always have a hard time.
Censure, yeah.
Exactly, to do that. But now, of course, the right wing is threatening to strip Democratic lawmakers from their committee assignments once they have control of the House in retaliation. I have no doubt that they'll do that.
Yeah, maybe they will. I mean, why wouldn't they? They are, like AOC's point about the nihilism, the turning against any idea that there's a significance to what government is supposed to be, the obligation it's supposed to have to its constituents, that elected officials should be in literally any way better than an average American in terms of feeling some sort of obligation. She's totally right. Look who is popular on the right. the Matt Gaetzes, the Madison Cawthorns, the Lauren Boeberts, the Marjorie Greens, these are just trolls. That's all they are. You know, maybe they're trolls that go on Fox News. Maybe 2 years ago they were trolls making Facebook videos, but that's all it is. They're not there because they've better articulated the economic crises facing conservative Americans, or they have a better understanding of the solutions. They advocate for those values. But no, they say awful things. They believe and spread conspiracy theories, and especially they give the base what it wants, which is depictions and threats of violence against the libs that they hate. So whether it's Marjorie Greene posing next to photos of Ilhan Omar with an AR-15, or her posting on Facebook that Nancy Pelosi should be shot in the head, or the AOC thing, we keep coming back to this because they know their base, and their base wants blood. They at the very least want promises that it's coming. Millions of Americans didn't suddenly start following QAnon, which ends with the Great Storm, where Trump rounds up everyone they hate, whether it's Chuck Schumer or Tom Hanks, and executes them all. They didn't just happen across that. They want violence against the people they hate, and these are grifters, trolls. That's the product that they're selling millions of conservative Americans.
Absolutely, and Paul Gosar, by the way, shows absolutely no remorse. And he engages in the same game that we've seen other right-wingers engage in, which is put out a threat and then pretend like, oh, it was just a joke. Why are you taking it so seriously? You're so crazy, like that kind of gaslighting, right? When we've seen violence play out by the right wing in this country, certainly during the Trump administration and even after the Trump administration. I mean, a US lawmaker condoning violence is not cute, it's not funny, and why don't you actually do something to better the lives of your constituents? Of course they don't want to do that. Anyway, here's Paul Gosar on the House floor just doubling down on his garbage.
No matter how much the left tries to quiet me, I will continue to speak out against amnesty for illegal aliens, defend the rule of law, and advance the American First agenda. If I must join
Gentleman's recognized, 30 seconds.
If I must join Alexander Hamilton, the first person attempted to be censored by this House, so be it. It is done.
Yeah, you're
compared himself to Alexander Hamilton, and then claims that he's being censored.
Yeah.
Look, there are consequences for speech when you're threatening people you work with. It happens in other settings.
Yeah.
You know, these people are not like above it. Like there shouldn't be a double standard just because you happen to be a US lawmaker.
Yeah, we don't have a lower standard for people with more power. Well, we do, honestly, when it comes to cops. We've sort of been beaten into submission as a people, but we shouldn't have that lower standard. And this is like, I know a lot of people will say, hey, we started following you in the news like during the pandemic or maybe during 2016. So maybe like maybe they're from outside of the US and they've only been following the news for a few years. This is not the way it was. You didn't have politicians like Donald Trump, not for like at least a few decades at the very least. You didn't have Tucker Carlson just openly taking talking points from 4chan and Alex Jones and just saying them. Glenn Beck tried, he was fired from Fox. O'Reilly would couch it a little bit. It was not nearly this open in media and on their politician side. You not casually joke about bringing guns to DC. It has become incredibly normalized. Lots has been normalized over the past few years, but perhaps nothing so dangerous as the casual joking about violence.
Yeah, and the fact that you have Kevin McCarthy, House Minority Leader, getting together with Republican lawmakers and saying we need to be unified in rejecting this, attempt to hold one of our own accountable. It's just, it tells you everything you need to know about the right wing, right? If they feel threatened, if there's a Kathy Griffin photo that they dislike, well then it is the biggest offense. Her entire life needs to be destroyed. But if one of their own threatens a Democratic lawmaker, we need to be unified in our opposition to any consequences.
Yeah.
And look, one of our members wrote in and asked if there were any Republicans who supported consequences for Gosar. The only two that I heard of were Representative Kinzinger and Liz Cheney. But of course, it's the usual people.
They're freed up too.
Everyone else is terrified of Trump's base. All right, bonus episode is next. See you there.
our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started, people would start giving us directions and say, okay, the mics are too large, move them, turn them into lav mics. I mean, they were incredible. And then one guy walked in and gave us a really expensive switcher and said, you guys need this, and walked out. Okay, it's amazing. They helped us build a studio. They did a $2 million funding campaign for us.